"Get out of my car." The driver didn't even look at her when he said it. He just reached across, pushed the door open, and left Sophia Bennett, founder of an $8 billion empire, standing alone on a dark country road with a broken suitcase and a dead phone. No cameras, no assistants, no security detail, just rain and silence, and the slow, humiliating realization that the most powerful woman in 3 zip codes had absolutely no idea what to do next. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and follow along until the very end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain didn't care who she was. It came down hard and sideways. The kind of rain that didn't just get you wet, it got inside you. It found the gap between your collar and your neck. It soaked through expensive Italian leather and turned the gravel road into a shallow river that crept over the toes of shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sophia Bennett stood at the edge of the road and did not cry. She had not cried in 11 years. She wasn't going to start now. She looked down at the suitcase. The wheel had snapped off somewhere back near the exit ramp, and now the whole case tilted sideways, one corner dragging whenever she tried to pull it. She had tried calling her assistant 3 times. She had tried calling her driver. She had tried the car service app, and the car service app had told her cheerfully, with a little animated checkmark, that there were no drivers available in her area. Her area. Her area was a 2-lane county road, somewhere between the highway and a town she had never heard of, and the nearest light she could see was a gas station sign that blinked once, twice, and then went dark, like it had decided to give up for the night. Her phone battery was at 4%. She stared at that number. 4%. She had 4% battery, and no car and no signal, and the rain was not stopping, and somewhere, right now, in a gleaming boardroom in a city she had built her life around, 11 executives were waiting for her signature on a merger document that would reshape the technology landscape of the entire eastern seaboard. And she was standing in the rain, alone. She almost laughed. Almost. She heard the truck before she saw it, an old engine. Not struggling, exactly, just honest about the work it was doing. The sound of a vehicle that had been kept alive by someone who understood it, not someone who could afford to replace it. The headlights came around the bend slowly. Too slowly for a driver who wasn't paying attention, which meant the driver was paying attention. Sophia didn't move toward the road. She had spent too many years surrounded by people who wanted something from her to feel comfortable flagging down a stranger in the dark. She just stood there, suitcase tilted, rain running off her hair in small rivers, and let the headlights find her. The truck slowed, stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the engine idling, and the rain and the light from the headlights cutting through the dark like 2 fingers pointing straight at her. Then the window came down. The man behind the wheel was maybe 40. Dark hair, a little long. A face that had been weathered by real work, not gym work. Not the kind of tiredness that comes from late nights in restaurants, but the kind that came from years of using your hands for something that mattered. He was wearing a flannel shirt. His forearm rested on the window frame, and he wasn't bothered at all by the rain hitting it. He looked at her the way a person looks at another person. Not at her coat, not at her watch, not at the suitcase. At her. "Are you okay?" 3 words. Sophia had been asked that question 10,000 times. In conference rooms, in interviews, in charity galas. She had answered it 10,000 times with the same polished, easy, reassuring smile. But this man was asking it like he actually wanted to know the answer. She opened her mouth. "I'm fine." He didn't move. He didn't accept that answer and drive away. He just looked at her, steady and unhurried, and something in that stillness cracked something loose inside her chest. "You don't look fine. My car broke down," she admitted. "A while ago? About an hour." He looked at the dark road behind her. He looked at the broken suitcase. He looked at the dead phone she was still holding in her hand, like it might suddenly resurrect itself. "Is someone coming for you?" "I couldn't reach anyone." He nodded once. "Like that settled something. I can take you somewhere warm." Sophia held still. Every instinct she had, every protocol she had built around herself over 15 years of being a public figure said no. Said wait. Said you don't get into trucks with strangers on dark roads. "You don't know me," she said. He almost smiled. Not a charming smile. Not a calculated smile. Just the small, genuine expression of a man who had already made up his mind and wasn't in a hurry about it. "No," he said. "But my daughter always tells me that if somebody looks like they need help, you help them." He reached across and pushed the passenger door open from the inside. "My name is Michael Carter," he said. "I'm a mechanic. I live about 4 miles up the road. You're welcome to come in out of the rain." Sophia looked at the open door. She looked at the dark road. She thought about the gas station sign that had gone out. She picked up her broken suitcase. "Sophia," she said. "Just the first name." "Thank you." The cab of the truck smelled like motor oil and something warm, maybe coffee, maybe just heat. There was a child's drawing, tucked into the sun visor. A crayon dog with enormous ears and the name Emma printed underneath in the careful, crooked letters of a young child. Michael didn't fill the silence with small talk. Most people, when they were nervous or polite, talked. They asked questions, they made observations, they performed comfort. Michael Carter drove. He turned the heater a little higher without being asked. He turned the radio down without being asked. He did both things quietly and naturally, the way you did things when you paid attention to people, without needing to be told what they needed. Sophia watched the road and felt something strange and unfamiliar pressing against her sternum. She couldn't name it right away. Later, she would understand. It had been the feeling of being noticed without being seen. "You said your car broke down," he said after a while. "What kind? A rental?" "I was supposed to have a driver, but there was a miscommunication." He nodded. "Where were you headed?" "I was meant to be staying at the Hartwell Inn." She paused. "I don't suppose you know it." "I know it. It's about 12 miles east." He glanced at her. "They'll be closed by now. Desk shuts at 10. She checked the time on his dashboard. 11:47. Sophia closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. "Right," she said. "You can use the phone at my place," Michael said. "Get someone to come for you in the morning. Road's not good for driving in this weather, anyway." "I don't want to impose, you're not." He said it simply. No performance, no big gesture, just a fact stated by a man who meant it. Sophia looked at the crayon dog in the sun visor. "Is Emma your daughter?" "She is. How old?" 8. A brief, quiet pride crossed his face. "Just a flicker. She'll probably be asleep by the time we get in, but she'll be up early." "She always is." "Does she know you pick up strangers in the rain?" He almost laughed. "This is actually the first time." Sophia turned to look at him. Really. He shrugged one shoulder. "Something about tonight felt different. I don't know how to explain it better than that." She turned back to the window. Outside, the rain was letting up. The trees along the road were black shapes against a gray sky. A mailbox, a fence, a light in a window somewhere off in the distance, warm and steady. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Sophia Bennett was not thinking about work. The farmhouse was exactly what she expected from the truck. Not impressive, not designed to impress anyone. It was a house that had been lived in, cared for, repaired when things broke, and left honest when things aged. The porch light came on automatically when the truck pulled in, and in that light she could see the vegetable garden beside the house, the clean-swept steps, the pair of small pink rain boots by the front door. Michael carried her suitcase. She didn't argue. Inside, the house was warm in a way that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The kitchen was the first room, old counters, a wooden table, drawings pinned to the refrigerator with fruit-shaped magnets, math homework, a permission slip for a field trip, a finger-painted sunset with Emma Carter, grade 2, written along the bottom edge. "You can sit anywhere," Michael said. "I'll put some water on." Sophia sat at the kitchen table. She could not remember the last time she had sat at a kitchen table. She ate at desks, she ate in cars, she ate in conference rooms and at restaurant tables she hadn't chosen, and in hotel dining rooms where someone always knew who she was. She ate meals that arrived on schedule, prepared by people who were paid to prepare them, and she ate them while reading something, or signing something, or listening to something. She sat at Michael Carter's kitchen table with her wet coat dripping quietly onto the chair and looked at a finger-painted sunset made by an 8-year-old girl. A door opened somewhere down the hall. Small feet on the floorboards. "Dad?" A little girl appeared in the kitchen doorway. 8 years old, dark hair like her father, loose and messy from sleep. A nightgown with small yellow stars. She was holding a stuffed bear by one ear, and she looked at Sophia with the wide, unguarded assessment that only children and people who have nothing to prove could manage. "Who is she?" Michael turned from the stove. "This is Sophia. Her car broke down." Emma stared. "Did you help her, Dad?" "I did." Emma looked at Sophia carefully. "Then you're okay," she said. And she went to the refrigerator, took out a small glass of orange juice, and sat down across from Sophia at the table as though they were old friends, and the kitchen at midnight was a perfectly reasonable place to be. Sophia looked at this child. "Aren't you supposed to be asleep?" she asked. "Probably," Emma said. "But I heard the truck and I always check when Dad gets home late." She looked at the stuffed bear. "Benny gets nervous, does he? He doesn't like waiting." Sophia smiled, not her professional smile, not the smile she wore in photographs. The real one. The small, unpolished one that had almost stopped coming naturally. Michael made tea. He made it without asking whether she preferred tea or coffee, and somehow he made the right choice. He set a cup in front of her with a small dish of sugar, and didn't stand over it explaining what he'd done. Emma had a small glass of milk and ate half a cookie, and then Michael said, "Back to bed, and Emma said, "Okay," without complaint, and looked at Sophia one more time. "You can stay in the blue room," Emma said seriously. "It has the best pillow." Then she was gone. Michael sat down across from Sophia. The kitchen was quiet. The rain had slowed to something soft outside. He wrapped both hands around his own cup and looked at her not with curiosity, not with the particular sharpened interest of someone who suspected something, just with the attention of a man who was comfortable with silence, and had decided to offer her some company in it. "Thank you," Sophia said, "for stopping. You didn't have to." "No," he agreed, "but it wasn't a hard decision. Most people would have driven past." "Probably." He looked at his cup. "I've driven past people before. Situations where I told myself it wasn't my business, or the timing was bad, or someone else would handle it." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't feel good about those times." Sophia studied him. "You're very honest about that. Doesn't help much to pretend otherwise." She looked at the drawings on the refrigerator. "What happened to Emma's mother?" She said it gently but directly. She didn't know why she was asking. She almost apologized for it. Michael didn't flinch. "She passed away 6 years ago. Car accident." He said it the way someone says a thing they have made peace with, not without pain, but without hiding from the pain either. "Emma was 2. She doesn't remember her. I'm sorry." "Emma has a good life," he said. "I made sure of that." A small pause. "That's the whole job, really. Just making sure she has a good life." Something in Sophia's chest pulled tight. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," Michael said, "but it's clear. When something is clear, it's easier to keep going even when it's hard." She thought about that. She thought about her own life, the clarity she'd had at the beginning, the sharp, bright sense of purpose that had driven her from nothing to everything over 15 years, and how somewhere along the way, that clarity had blurred into motion, into momentum, into doing the next thing, because the next thing was always waiting. She had stopped asking herself why. She couldn't remember exactly when. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure. When you picked me up tonight, you didn't ask me anything about myself. You didn't ask where I came from or who I was. You just opened the door. You needed help," he said. "The rest was your business. Most people want to know who they're helping." Michael looked at her steadily. "Most people want to know if you're worth helping. Those are different things." The rain stopped. Just like that one moment it was falling, soft and steady, and the next the world outside was completely still. Sophia set down her cup. "The rest is my business," she repeated quietly, like she was testing the weight of the words, like it had been a very long time since anyone had given her anything without first wanting to know what it was worth. She slept in the blue room. The pillow was in fact excellent. She lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and listened to the old house settle around her small creaks, the distant sound of a clock somewhere, the scratch of a branch against a window. And she could not remember the last time she had been somewhere that had a sound. Her apartment in the city was silent, soundproofed by design. 24th floor. No birds, no branches, no clocks that ticked. She had chosen it for those reasons. Quiet, she had believed, was what she needed. But this wasn't quiet. This was full of small sounds that meant people had been here, were here, had built something real in these walls. A life. A small, ordinary, irreplaceable life. She thought about what Michael had said. Most people want to know if you're worth helping. She thought about the 11 executives in the boardroom. She thought about the merger. She thought about her phone, somewhere in her coat pocket, holding somewhere around 4% of a battery charge, and somewhere around 4,000 unread messages. She thought about the last person who had asked her, not in a professional context, not in a therapy session she had attended twice and abandoned, not in a magazine interview, the last person who had asked her simply, in passing, in the way you ask someone you actually care about, "Are you happy?" She could not remember. She turned onto her side. Outside the window, the stars had come out. She looked at them for a long time. In the morning, Michael was already in the kitchen when she came downstairs. He had coffee ready, real coffee, from a drip machine that had seen better days, and it was the best coffee she had tasted in years. Emma was already dressed for school, sitting at the table, drawing something in a notebook. She looked up when Sophia appeared. "You stayed," Emma said. Not accusatory, satisfied. "I did," Sophia said. "I told Benny you would." Emma returned to her drawing. He worried anyway. Sophia poured herself coffee and stood at the window. The morning was clear and sharp, the kind of morning that only comes after hard rain. Everything washed clean and precise, the colors brighter than they had any right to be. She could see Michael's garage from here. A small building behind the house with the doors folded open. A car up on a lift, tools arranged on a pegboard with the kind of careful organization that spoke of discipline, not obsession. "He gets up at 5, Emma said, without looking up from her drawing. "Your dad? He's always out there before school. He says the morning hours are the best ones." She paused. "I think he just likes it when it's quiet." Sophia looked at the garage. A man who got up at 5 in the morning to go work in his garage because he liked the quiet hours. She thought about her own mornings. Alarms at 5:30. Emails before 6. Conference calls by 7. The day arriving like a freight train that she had to run alongside and catch. She had thought that was what she wanted. She had built that life deliberately, brick by brick, and she had been so focused on the building that she had not stopped to ask whether she wanted to live inside it. "What are you drawing?" Sophia asked. Emma turned the notebook around. A woman standing in the rain, a truck with its headlights on, and above them both, crayon stars in a dark sky. Sophia stared at the drawing. "Emma," she said quietly, "that's beautiful." The little girl tore it carefully out of the notebook and set it on the table between them. "You can have it," she said, "so you don't forget." Sophia picked up the drawing. Her hand was not steady. "Forget what?" she asked. Emma tilted her head. "That somebody stopped," she said simply. Michael came in from the garage at 7:30. He washed his hands at the sink, poured himself coffee, looked at the two of them at the table, Sophia with Emma's drawing in her hands, Emma with her notebook, and he stopped. He just looked at the picture. "She drew that this morning," Sophia said. "She draws everything," Michael said. "The whole world goes through that notebook." He sat down across from Sophia and looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Not suspicion. Something more careful than that. Something that said he was a man who noticed things, and had noticed something he hadn't expected. "Your phone," he said. "Last night when I brought in your bag." The screen lit up for a second before it died. Sophia went still. "There were a lot of notifications," he said. "I wasn't reading them. I wasn't trying to," he held her gaze. "But I saw the name." The kitchen went quiet. Emma was looking at her notebook. Michael was looking at Sophia. "Sophia Bennett," he said. Not a question. She set the drawing down carefully. This was the moment. She had lived this moment before, the moment when someone found out, when the air in the room changed, when eyes recalibrated and posture shifted, and the person across from you stopped being with you and started calculating. She waited for it. Michael picked up his coffee. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Not angry, not calculating, just asking, "Because I wanted one person," she said. "Just one person to meet Sophia." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's who I met," he said. She blinked. "Last night. On the road," he set the cup down. "I didn't pick up a CE. I picked up a woman standing in the rain who needed a ride." He shrugged, one shoulder, the same quiet shrug from the truck. "That's still who's sitting at my kitchen table." Sophia opened her mouth. She closed it again. Emma looked up from her notebook. "Are you famous?" she asked Sophia. Sophia looked at the little girl. "Some people think so." Emma considered this seriously. "That's okay," she said. "You're nice," and she went back to her drawing. Sophia looked at Michael. Her throat was tight in a way she couldn't manage around. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have told you." "You don't owe a stranger your whole life story," Michael said. "I picked you up in the rain. You were scared. You needed help." A pause. "You still needed help this morning." "I always need help," she said. The words came out before she could stop them. Honest. Raw. More honest than she had intended. Michael looked at her steadily. "Most people do," he said. Outside, the morning light moved across the kitchen floor. Emma kept drawing. The coffee cooled between them. And Sophia Bennett sat at a kitchen table in a farmhouse she had never heard of 12 hours ago, holding a crayon drawing made by an 8-year-old girl, and felt for the first time in longer than she could measure that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Her assistant reached her at 8:15, panic in every syllable. "Miss Bennett, thank God. We've been trying to reach you all night." "The board is I know," Sophia said. She was standing on the porch. The morning was cold and clear, and a cardinal had landed on the fence post at the end of the garden. She was watching it. "I'll be there this afternoon. Reschedule the morning calls. The merger will keep until afternoon." She paused. "I'll need a car." Of course, of course. 2 hours?" She looked through the window. Michael was doing the breakfast dishes. Emma was pulling on her school bag, one strap twisted, trying to fix it. Michael reached over, without being asked, and straightened the strap. Emma looked up at him and grinned. 2 hours, Sophia said. She hung up. She stood on the porch and watched the cardinal. It sat perfectly still on the fence post, bright red against the morning, and looked at something she couldn't see. Then it was gone. She stood there a moment longer. Then she went back inside. The car was coming in 2 hours. Sophia stood in the kitchen and watched wash the breakfast dishes, and told herself that 2 hours was enough time to say a proper goodbye, thank the man for his hospitality, write a check for his trouble, and then she stopped herself on that last thought, because she already knew, somehow, with a certainty she couldn't entirely explain, that Michael Carter was not a man you wrote a check to. She had tried that reflex before. It was her default. When someone did something for her, she compensated them. Cleanly, efficiently, with a number that left no ambiguity. It was the language her world spoke, and she had learned to speak it fluently. But something about this kitchen, about this man, standing at a sink with soap on his hands, singing something low and tuneless under his breath, because he didn't know she was watching, told her that offering him money would be the exact wrong move. It would collapse something. She didn't know what. She just knew she didn't want to collapse it. Emma had left for school 20 minutes ago. The bus came at the end of the road, and Sophia had watched from the window as Michael walked his daughter to the corner, carrying her backpack in one hand while Emma held his other, talking the entire way, talking the way children talked when they trusted completely that someone was listening. Michael had nodded. He had laughed at something. He had fixed her collar before she climbed the steps. Then he had stood there and watched the bus disappear. Just stood there, not checking his phone, not turning back to the house immediately. Just watching the place where the bus had been, the way a man watches something precious go out of sight and wants to hold the moment a little longer. Sophia had stepped back from the window before he turned around. She didn't know why she had done that. She only knew it had felt like witnessing something private. Now Michael set the last dish on the rack and dried his hands and turned and found her standing there with her coffee cup and whatever expression she was failing to manage. "You're thinking very hard," he said. "Habit," she said. He refilled his own cup and leaned against the counter. Easy, unhurried. The posture of existed at a different pace than the world she came from, and who didn't feel any particular urgency to speed up. "Your car's coming at 10, he said. 10:30. He nodded. "I've got a truck coming in at 9. I'll be in the garage. You're welcome to wait inside." "You're going to work?" "I work every day." She looked at him. "Even after finding a stranded CEO in the rain?" The corner of his mouth moved, especially then. "Keeps me grounded." She laughed. She didn't mean to. It came out surprised and genuine and slightly too loud for the quiet kitchen, and she clapped a hand over her mouth like she was embarrassed by it, which made him laugh too, a real laugh, unguarded, the kind that started in the chest. For a moment, that was all there was. Two people laughing in a kitchen. No context, no hierarchy, no $8 billion empire pressing its weight into the room. Then Michael's expression steadied and he looked at her with that direct, unhurried attention she was already recognizing as simply who he was. "Can I ask you something now?" he said. "You helped me out of the rain," she said. "You can ask me anything. Last night, before your phone died," he chose the words carefully, not to be delicate but to be precise. "You had hundreds of notifications. That kind of volume, does that happen every day?" She looked into her cup. "Every hour," she said. He was quiet for a moment. What does that feel like? Nobody had ever asked her that. Not what it was like to run a company. Not what it was like to be successful or powerful or recognized. What it felt like. The physical, daily, interior experience of it. She thought about it seriously. "Like being in a current," she said finally. "A river that's always moving. You can't really stop swimming. If you stop, you start to fall behind. And falling behind means things break. People lose jobs, deals collapse. You become someone who couldn't hold it together. She paused. So you don't stop, Michael nodded slowly. But last night he said you stopped. She looked up. He wasn't being clever about it. He wasn't setting a trap. He was just observing something true. The current stopped for me, she said. I didn't exactly choose it, maybe, Michael said. But you got in the truck. She opened her mouth to say something. She didn't know what, because he was right, and it was a small, simple right that had a very large thing underneath it, and she was not sure she wanted to excavate that thing before 10:30. She put her cup down. I'm going to take a walk, she said. If that's all right. Land's yours to walk on, he said. She pulled her coat from the hook by the door. It was still slightly damp. She put it on anyway. Outside, the morning had that washed quality that follows a hard rain, the air clean and cold, everything slightly more itself than usual, the light coming in at a low angle that made ordinary things cast long shadows. She walked past the garden, past the garage, where she could already hear Michael opening the big overhead doors, past the fence where the cardinal had been. She walked to the end of the property and stood there looking out over a field. She couldn't name the contents of, she was not a woman who knew fields, and she thought about what he had said. But you got in the truck. She had gotten in the truck. She had sat in a stranger's kitchen at midnight and drunk tea, and let an 8-year-old girl tell her that the blue room had the best pillow. She had slept 9 hours without waking, once she, who had not slept more than 5 hours uninterrupted in the past 3 years. She had sat at a breakfast table and looked at a crayon drawing of herself standing in the rain and felt something she couldn't yet name break open quietly in her chest. She had gotten in the truck. The question underneath that, the question she was standing in a cold field, trying not to hear herself ask was, why had she needed to? She went back inside and found a pad of paper on the kitchen counter and a pen, and she sat down at the table and she started writing. Not emails, not memos, not talking points for the merger. She wrote down everything she could remember about the last 12 hours. The driver who had told her to get out, the rain, the broken suitcase, the headlights coming around the bend. Michael's voice through the open window, "Are you okay?" with the weight of someone who actually wanted to know. Emma in her star nightgown, holding the bear called Benny. The coffee, the pillow, the sound of a clock in the dark, and the feeling, real and solid and bewildering, of a house that was full of life. She wrote it all down in longhand, which she hadn't done in years, and when she reached the bottom of the page, she stopped and looked at what she had written. It was the longest she had thought about anything that wasn't work in longer than she could honestly calculate. The sound of an engine outside, not the truck, something smaller, a car that wasn't from here, made her look up. Her car, 45 minutes early. She looked at her watch. She looked at the notepad. She heard Michael's voice from the garage, something to a customer, easy and competent, and she made a decision before she had time to think it through. She picked up the notepad. She walked to the garage. Michael was under a truck, just his legs visible, extended on a rolling board, and the sound of a socket wrench working steady and efficient from underneath. There was another man in the garage, a customer, she guessed, heavy-set, in a feed store hat, leaning against the wall and telling a story about his neighbor's tractor. Michael was listening from underneath the truck, making the occasional low sound that meant he was following along. Sophia stood in the doorway. The customer noticed her first. He straightened slightly, the particular straightening of a small-town man, seeing someone who looked like she did not belong in a mechanic's garage. "Michael," he said, you got company." The socket wrench stopped. Michael rolled out from under the truck and sat up and looked at her. He registered the coat, the notepad, her expression, which she was aware she was not completely controlling. "Your car come early?" "Yes." He nodded and stood and wiped his hands. "I'll walk you out." The customer politely became very interested in a tool on the wall. Outside, between the garage and the long black car with its engine running, Michael stopped and looked at her with that steady attention that she was already starting to feel like a physical thing. "I need to tell you something before I go," she said. "All right." She looked at the notepad in her hands. "I wasn't just passing through," she said. I was. But I came out this way because I needed to get away from the city. I do this sometimes. I get in a car, and I go somewhere I don't know, and She stopped. "I try to remember what it feels like to just be somewhere." Michael listened. "It never works," she said. "Because I bring my phone. Because the calls follow me. Because I can't actually." She stopped again. "I can't actually put it down. Until last night," Michael said. She looked up at him. Until last night, she agreed. He was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do with that? I don't know yet. She looked at the notepad, but I wrote it down, so I don't forget what it felt like. He looked at her for a long moment. Sophia, what? You know where the garage is, he said. If you need to come back. She felt something move through her that she didn't have a clean word for. Not hope exactly, not gratitude exactly. Something older than both of those, and quieter. Why would you offer that? She asked. You don't know me. I know what I saw, he said, last night at the table. This morning. A person trying to find something they lost. He shrugged that same quiet, honest shrug. That's worth knowing. She wanted to say something. Something adequate. Something that matched the weight of what he'd said. She said, thank you, Michael, he said. Drive safe. And she got into the car. The driver's name was Paul. He had worked for her car service for 3 years, and she had never once asked him anything about himself. He asked her now if she wanted the news on or off, and she said off, and he said of course, and the car pulled smoothly out of the gravel drive onto the county road. She looked back once. Michael was standing at the garage door, watching the car go the same way he had watched the school bus go. Just standing there, holding the moment. She faced forward. She opened her phone. 4012 notifications. She stared at the number. Then she looked at the notepad in her lap. She put the phone face down on the seat. She opened the notepad. And for the first time in 11 years, Sophia Bennett spent 2 hours in a car without answering a single message. The boardroom was on the 42nd floor, and the view was impeccable. And she had stopped seeing it approximately 8 years ago. The 11 executives were at the table. The merger documents were stacked in the center. Her chief operating officer, David Marsh, 52 years old, excellent at his job, never said anything. He didn't calculate twice in advance, rose when she entered and said, Miss Bennett, we were. And she said, I know, and sat down and opened the top document. For 2 hours, she worked through the merger, line by line, question by question. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. Numbers were a language she had spoken since she was 19 years old, and working double shifts to pay for the business school textbooks that would change her life. But today, something else was happening underneath the work. She kept noticing things. She noticed that David Marsh had not once asked anyone else at the table a question. He directed everything at her. Every problem, every decision, every interpretive judgment about what the numbers meant funneled directly to her, as though no one else in the room had the capacity to think. She noticed that the junior analyst at the far end, a young woman, maybe 26, who had sent the most thorough prep document of anyone, had not spoken once. Not because she had nothing to say. Sophia could see it. She was sitting there with a pen moving slightly in her hand, tracking the conversation, and every time there was a pause, she opened her mouth the smallest fraction and then closed it again. She noticed that the meeting had been going for 40 minutes and no one had used the word why. Why this merger? Why this structure? Why these terms? Why now? Everyone was discussing how to execute, how to present it, how to manage the regulatory questions, how to spin the narrative to the market. Nobody was asking whether any of it was the right thing to do. She set her pen down. Why are we doing this? She said. David looked at her. Ms. Bennett, the merger. Why are we doing it? She looked around the table. Not how, not what it's worth. Why? Silence. The kind of silence that happens when people who are very good at following instructions are suddenly asked to think. The young analyst at the end of the table, her name was Rachel. Sophia now remembered. Rachel Torres. 3 years. With the company. MIT graduate Rachel Torres cleared her throat. The market position is defensive, Rachel said. The real reason is that if we don't acquire them, a competitor will. And then we've lost both the technology and the talent pool. A pause during which David Marsh looked at her with an expression that said, I wish you hadn't said that. But the synergies we're projecting in the presentation are inflated. The real value is in the engineering team, about 40 people. If those 40 people leave in the first year, which historically happens in acquisitions like this, the deal is worth about 1/3 of what the documents say. The table was very quiet. Sophia looked at Rachel Torres. How long have you known that? She said. Rachel held her ground. Since I ran the models 2 weeks ago. And you didn't put it in the prep document. I did, a beat. It was edited out before distribution. Sophia looked at David Marsh. David Marsh was very carefully looking at the merger documents. Something settled in Sophia's chest, cold and clear and very, very calm. We're going to take a 20-minute break, she said. She stood up. Everyone stood. She looked at Rachel Torres. Can you stay, she said. David Marsh moved toward her. Ms. Bennett, if you have questions about the data minus. Thank you, David. She kept her eyes on Rachel. I'll let you know if I need anything else. Rachel Torres sat across from her in the small meeting room off the main boardroom and did not perform confidence. She was nervous. Sophia could see that, but she wasn't hiding it, which was actually a kind of courage. Walk me through your numbers, Sophia said. Rachel walked her through the numbers. It took 11 minutes, and it was the clearest, most honest analysis Sophia had heard in this building in longer than she wanted to admit. Why did you stay quiet in there? Sophia asked when she'd finished. Rachel looked at her hands. Because the last time I contradicted David in a meeting, I was left off the next 3 project teams. Sophia said nothing. I need this job, Rachel said. I have student loans, and I'm supporting my younger brother through college, and I can't afford to. She stopped. I know that's not what you want to hear. It's exactly what I want to hear, Sophia said. Rachel looked up. Because it's the truth, Sophia said. And I've been in rooms full of people not telling me the truth for a very long time, and I am very tired of it. Rachel said nothing. She was recalibrating. Sophia could see trying to determine whether this was a test, whether the honest response had been a mistake, whether she should walk it back. It wasn't a test, Sophia said. I'm not going to ask you to run again. I'm going to ask you to do something harder. What? Come back into the boardroom with me and present your actual numbers. Rachel's face went through several things in quick succession. Fear first, then something steadier underneath. David is not going to like that, she said. No, Sophia agreed. He's not. He has a lot of influence in this company. He does. And you're asking me to— I'm asking you to say true things, Sophia said. In a room full of people who have been trained not to. Rachel looked at her. Why, she said. Why me? Why now? Sophia thought about a kitchen table in a small farmhouse. She thought about a man who had asked her what it felt like. She thought about the difference between a room full of people who wanted something from her and a man who had opened a truck door without knowing her name. Because someone did it for me recently, Sophia said. Told me the truth when it was easier not to. She paused. I owe a debt I can't pay directly, so I'm going to pay it sideways. Rachel Torres looked at her for a long moment. Then she picked up her folder. Okay, she said. The boardroom meeting ran 3 more hours. David Marsh was not happy. The merger was restructured from the ground up, based on Rachel's numbers, with a specific focus on retaining the engineering team rather than absorbing the balance sheet. 2 of the other executives, the ones Sophia had noticed, watching Rachel earlier with expressions that suggested they agreed with her and hadn't said so, gradually added their voices as the afternoon went on. By the time they were finished, the deal looked nothing like it had when the day started. It was also genuinely a better deal. Sophia sat at the head of the table and looked at the documents and thought about what Michael Carter had said that morning. Most people want to know if you're worth helping. Those are different things. She had been running a company where the second thing had replaced the first, where everyone in the room had been calculating worth to the deal, worth to their position, worth to David Marsh's approval, and nobody had been paying attention to whether the actual people involved actually needed help. 40 engineers at the company they were acquiring. 40 people whose futures would be shaped by decisions made in this room by people who had edited their names out of the documents. She thought about Rachel Torres and her student loans, and her brother in college, and her careful, precise, honest numbers that had been cut from the prep document. She thought about Emma Carter drawing a woman standing in the rain, so you don't forget that somebody stopped. At 6 o'clock, she stood up and said, "We'll reconvene Monday with the revised terms." And then she did something she had not done in longer than she could remember. She went around the table and asked each person by name what they thought about the new direction. Not David first, not the senior people. She started at the far end. She started with Rachel. She was in the elevator going down when her phone rang. Unknown number, local area code, not the city, somewhere rural. She answered. Miss Bennett, a woman's voice. Professional but not corporate. This is Janet Pruitt. I'm the office manager at Carter's Auto and Repair. Mr. Carter asked me to call. He thought you might have left something in the house. A notepad. Sophia looked at her bag. She had the note. She had picked it up from the table before she left. I have it, she said. Thank you for calling. A brief pause. I'll let him know, Janet said. He was concerned. Michael Carter, who had a truck coming in at 9 and a daughter to pick up from school and a garage that she already suspected from small things, from the careful way he'd talked around his finances. From the too precise way he'd said "I work every day," she suspected was closer to the edge than he'd let on. Michael Carter had thought about a notepad she might have left behind and asked his office manager to track down her number and call. Because he was concerned, she stood in the elevator and held the phone and felt something she had almost forgotten the shape of. Someone paying attention, not to what she was worth, to her. The elevator reached the lobby and the doors opened onto the marble entrance of one of the most expensive buildings in the city. She stood there. She thought about 4 miles up a county road. About coffee that tasted better than it had any right to. About a man who got up at 5 in the morning and went to his garage because he liked the quiet hours, and who had taken the time, in the middle of his day, in the middle of his work, to make sure she hadn't left something behind. Her assistant appeared at her elbow. "Car's ready, Bennett," and the Hartwell group called again. "Tell them Monday," Sophia said. But they said it was urgent. "Everything is urgent," she said. Monday. She walked out through the lobby. She put her phone in her bag. She pulled out the notepad instead, and she wrote, "Call him." Not about business, not about the notepad, just call. Then she stood on the sidewalk outside the most expensive building in the city, watching the evening traffic move past, and felt the shape of a decision forming slow and solid and more certain than anything she had felt in the boardroom all day. She didn't know what it meant yet. She only knew it meant something. And for Sophia Bennett, who had built an empire on knowing exactly what everything meant before she moved, that uncertainty felt less like a problem and more like the first honest thing that had happened to her in years. She called him on a Thursday, not because Thursday meant anything. Not because she had planned it for Thursday. She had planned it for Monday, then Tuesday, then Wednesday, and each time the day had arrived and something had intervened, a call, a crisis, a decision that only she could make, and she had let it intervene, because letting it intervene was easier than admitting she was afraid. Afraid of what exactly? She couldn't have said cleanly. Afraid that his voice would sound different when she was calling from a city. Afraid that the distance would have done what distance always did, collapsed the thing back into proportion, made it small and ordinary and explicable. Afraid that she had built something in her memory that hadn't actually existed. She called from the car on the way home from the office, which was the only time in her day when no one could walk through a door and hand her something. It rang 3 times, Carter's auto, his voice, exactly the same. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Michael, it's Sophia." A beat, not a long one, just enough to tell her he hadn't been expecting it. Sophia, not surprised exactly, just present, like he'd simply arrived at the moment and was standing in it. "How are you?" I don't know. That's sort of why I called." She looked out the window at the city moving past. "Your office manager called about the notepad." "I know she did. I asked her to. I had it. I wanted to say thank you for checking." "That wasn't why I asked her to call." She went still. "What?" "I wanted to make sure you got home all right," he said. "The roads were still wet that morning, and your driver," he stopped. "I just wanted to know you were okay." The city outside her window did something it had never done before. It went quiet, somehow, not literally, not physically. The traffic was exactly as loud as it always was, but inside her head it went quiet. The constant running calculation of her life, dropping suddenly to nothing. "I got home all right," she said. "Good, Michael." "Yeah. Do you always worry about people you've known for 12 hours? He thought about that. She could tell he was actually thinking about it, not just reaching for the polite answer. "Not usually," he said. "But you're not usual." She didn't know what to do with that. She said, "How's Emma?" And just like that, they were talking. Really talking. Emma had won a spelling bee at school and had come home and announced that she intended to be a writer, and Michael had said that was wonderful. And Emma had said she was going to write a story about the woman who stayed in the blue room. And Michael had said maybe ask before writing stories about real people. And Emma had said Sophia wouldn't mind, she could tell. Michael's voice when he talked about his daughter was a different register than his regular voice, not softer exactly, but fuller, like there was more of him in it. Sophia sat in the back of the car and listened and did not check her phone once. She stayed on the call for 43 minutes. When they finally hung up, her driver had been parked outside her building for 11 minutes without saying anything, because he was a man who had worked for her long enough to know when not to say anything. She sat in the parked car for another moment. Then she picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Clear Saturday morning," she said. "You have the Henderson breakfast at minus. Reschedule it." A pause. Her assistant had worked for her for 7 years. She knew the weight of a pause. "Of course, Ms. Bennett," she said. "Should I ask for a reason or personal?" Sophia said. "Just say personal." She drove out Saturday morning herself. No driver. Her own car, not the fleet vehicle. Not the town car, but the car she kept in the garage beneath her building and almost never used. A dark blue sedan that she had bought 3 years ago in a moment of wanting something normal and then promptly ignored. She remembered the road. She wouldn't have thought she would. She had been wet and exhausted, and half lost the night she'd driven it in Michael's truck, but she remembered it. The bend where the headlights had come around, the mailbox, the fence, the farmhouse with the porch light. She parked on the gravel and sat for a moment. This was unusual behavior. She knew that. Sophia Bennett did not drive herself 40 miles out of the city on a Saturday morning to sit in a mechanic's driveway. Sophia Bennett had a full schedule and a company to run, and a reputation built on precision and control, and never doing anything without a strategy attached. She got out of the car. The garage doors were open, and she could hear the radio, playing something low and country, and she walked around the side of the house. And Michael was at the workbench, with his back to her, doing something with a small engine part. And he turned when he heard her footsteps with the ease of a man who trusted his own property. When he saw her, he went still for exactly 1 second. "Then you drove yourself." "I do know how to drive," she said. "I didn't say you didn't." He set down the engine part. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "I know." She put her hands in her coat pockets. "I was afraid if I told you, I'd talk myself out of it." He looked at her for a moment. Then he crossed to the small table, where his coffee thermos sat, and poured a second cup. She noticed he had a second cup there, a plain white one, like he'd put it out just in case and held it out to her. "Emma's at a birthday party," he said. "She'll be back by noon." Sophia took the cup. "Then we have a few hours," she said. "And I have a question." He waited. "The garage," she said. "How long has it been struggling?" His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did a quick, careful assessment, the look of a man deciding how honest to be. "What makes you think it's struggling?" he said. "Because I pay attention to things," she said, not unkindly. "The way you said I work every day the first morning. The way you didn't say anything about the future when you talked about Emma. The way your truck has been repaired so many times the repairs have repairs." She paused. "And because I asked Janet," he blinked. "You called my office manager?" "She called me first," Sophia said. "And she was worried about you. She told me. Not everything, but enough." Michael set his cup down. His jaw tightened once, just once, and she could see him working through something. Pride and practicality, and something that looked like exhaustion running underneath both of them. "It's been a hard 2 years," he said finally. "Tell me." He looked at her. "Why?" "Because you listened to me," she said. "In your kitchen, on the phone Thursday. You listened like it mattered. And now I'm here, and I want to return the favor." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he talked. "It started with the pandemic, and then it started with the part suppliers, and then it started with the 2 big dealers in the county who had started doing their own in-house service, undercutting the small shops on everything except trust, and trust didn't pay the electricity bill. He had been keeping the garage alive on what he could. He had refinanced once. He had let one of his 2 employees go last year, a kid named Danny, who had been with him for 4 years. And Michael had given him 6 months of severance he couldn't afford, because Danny had a baby at home, and Michael couldn't look at that baby's face and do anything less. He still had Janet part-time. He still had the loyal customers. He still had the work ethic that had always been his most reliable tool. But the numbers were the numbers. He said all of this without self-pity, without the particular tone people used when they wanted sympathy. He said it the way he said everything, directly, with the careful precision of someone who had looked at the facts long enough to stop flinching at them. When he finished, Sophia said, "What do you need?" He looked at her immediately. "I don't want your money," he said. "I didn't offer money." He paused. "What do you need," she repeated, "to make this work? Not charity, not rescue. What does the business actually need?" He looked at the workbench. "A contract," he said after a moment. "One steady municipal or commercial account that gives me consistent volume. Enough to keep the lights on while I rebuild the customer base. He said it like a diagnosis, not a wish. That's what's missing. Everything else I can manage. A fleet contract, Sophia said. Something like that. Bennett Global has a regional operations center 17 miles from here, she said. Fleet of 42 vehicles, currently contracted with a service company in the city. She looked at him. Who charges them 3 times what a local shop would? Michael went very still. Sophia, I'm not giving you anything, she said clearly. I'm pointing out a market inefficiency. What you do with that information is your business. He looked at her for a long time. She looked back. She could see the war on his face, pride on one side, practicality on the other, the deep, bone-level resistance of a man who had built everything himself and was not at all sure he wanted help, even honest help, even help that asked for nothing. I'd have to bid for it, he said carefully, like anyone else. Yes, she said, you would, and you wouldn't. I run a company, she said. I don't rig procurement. You'd go through the same process as everyone else. A pause. But the current contractor is overpriced and I've known it for a year, and now I'm going to actually do something about it. He picked up his coffee. He looked at it. You're something else, he said quietly. Is that good or bad? He almost smiled. I haven't decided yet. Emma came back from the birthday party at 12:15 with cake in her hair and a balloon she refused to relinquish and the focused, glowing energy of a child who had been in a room full of other children for 3 hours and was now ready to have opinions about everything. She saw Sophia's car before she got to the door. She stopped walking. She looked at the car. She looked at her father. She looked at Sophia, who was standing in the kitchen doorway. You came back, Emma said. I did, Sophia said. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to most things. Ben said you would, she said. I said probably not because famous people are busy. She came through the door and went directly to the kitchen table and sat down with the balloon tied to her wrist. I'm glad Benny was right, so am I, Sophia said. Michael was standing behind her, and she could feel him not touching, not close, just present in the way he was always present, that particular quality of attention that had no performance in it. She was getting used to it. That was the thing she hadn't anticipated. She was getting used to what it felt like, to be around someone who wasn't performing. Can you stay for lunch? Emma said. Emma, Michael said. What? She drove all the way here. She should eat. Sophia looked at Michael. Michael looked at his daughter. She can stay, he said, if she wants to. I want to, Sophia said. Emma nodded, like this had been settled before it was even a conversation. I'm going to wash the cake out of my hair, she said, and disappeared down the hall. Balloon, trailing. Michael turned to the refrigerator. She's never wrong about people, he said quietly, not looking at her. It used to worry me she trusts so easily, but she's never once been wrong. What does she trust about me? Sophia asked. He turned and looked at her. That you came back, he said. Because you wanted to. Not because of anything else. She held his gaze. She's right, Sophia said. He nodded once. He turned back to the refrigerator. How do you feel about tomato soup? He said. I feel excellent about tomato soup, she said. They fell into a rhythm over lunch that felt inexplicable by any logic she could name. Emma talked about the birthday party, and about the spelling bee, and about the story she was writing, which had a main character named Sophie one letter off. Emma explained. So it was fictional, who could talk to animals and also ran a big company, and also knew how to fix cars. Sophia said that was an excellent combination of skills. Emma said she thought so too. Michael listened to all of it with the same full, unhurried attention he gave everything. Sophia watched him listen. She thought about the boardroom on Thursday. The 11 people angled toward her, waiting for her to tell them what to think. The way no one had looked at Rachel Torres until she had pointed at her. The way the room's energy was organized entirely around one person and moved nowhere without permission. Then she thought about this kitchen. Emma talking to both of them, turning from one to the other, treating them as equal presences. Michael occasionally adding a sentence that redirected the story gently, without interrupting. The radio still going softly from the garage, drifting in through the open window. 2 entirely different ways of being in a room. She knew which one felt like breathing. After lunch, Emma went to draw, and Michael poured more coffee, and they sat at the table in the comfortable silence she was starting to recognize as a feature of him, rather than a gap to fill. Can I ask you something personal? She said. You've asked me several personal things today. This is more personal. He looked at her steadily. Go ahead. Do you ever get lonely? She said. Doing it alone. Raising her alone. He was quiet for long enough that she thought she might have crossed a line. Then he said every day, his voice was even factual. Not asking for anything. I don't say that as a complaint, he said. I love my life. I love this house and this garage, and I love that kid more than I know how to say. But he looked at his cup. Yeah, every day. I get lonely in rooms full of people, Sophia said. He looked up. I can be in a room with 100 people, she said. And the loneliness is, she stopped. It's worse, actually, than being alone. Because you're surrounded by people, and none of them are really there. Everyone in the room is managing something. Managing their position, their image, what I think of them, what they need from me. She shook her head. Nobody's just there. I'm just here, Michael said. Simply. Not as a promise or a declaration, as a statement of fact. The kitchen was very quiet. I know, she said. That's what I can't stop thinking about. He looked at her with an expression she was still learning to read, direct and careful, and something underneath both that she couldn't put a name to yet. Sophia, he said, what are you doing? What do you mean? I mean, he stopped. He turned his cup once on the table, thinking. I'm a mechanic in a county nobody's heard of. You run a company worth, I don't even know what it's worth. 8.4 billion, last quarter. He looked at her. 8.4 billion, he repeated, with the particular flat tone of someone confronting a number that has no human scale. I know, she said. Believe me, I know. That's not a small difference, he said. No, he shook his head. That's a different world. Yes, she agreed, it is. She looked at him directly. But I'm sitting at your kitchen table, and I drove 40 miles to get here. And I did not tell my assistant where I was going. And I have not once in 2 hours thought about the merger, or the board, or the Henderson breakfast I canceled this morning. A pause. What does that tell you? He looked at her for a long moment. That you're either running away from something, he said slowly, or running toward something. I've been running away for 11 years, she said. I think I'm done with that. Something moved across his face. Careful, considered, not letting it go too fast. I have a daughter, he said. She's 8. She's the whole of my life. Whatever happens anywhere near me, near us, she's the first consideration. Always. I know that, Sophia said. I'm not a man who My life doesn't have room for something that isn't real. Emma's had enough things disappear on her. I won't add to that. Sophia felt the weight of what he was saying. Not a warning exactly. More like a man setting out the terms of something very important, in the same careful, honest way he set out everything. I'm not asking you to make room for something that isn't real, she said. I'm asking you, she stopped, rearranged. I'm not asking you for anything yet. I'm telling you that I drove 40 miles on a Saturday morning, and it was the most purposeful thing I've done in a long time. He held her gaze. For a moment the whole kitchen held still. Then Emma appeared in the doorway, notebook in hand. Dad, she said, how do you spell suspicious? The moment broke. Michael spelled it. Emma disappeared, and Sophia looked at the table and felt something settle in her, not resolution, not certainty, but something quieter and more durable than either. The feeling of a direction found. She stayed until 4. She helped Emma with a section of the story, the part where Sophie with Annie had to decide whether to tell the truth to the man who had helped her. Knowing the truth would change everything. Emma had gotten stuck there. She said she didn't know what Sophie would do. Sophia sat next to Emma at the kitchen table with the notebook between them. She'd tell the truth, Sophia said. But what if it changes things? Things change anyway, Sophia said. The question is whether you change them on purpose or let them change by accident. Emma wrote that down in the notebook, verbatim, with great care. Michael, leaning in the kitchen doorway watching, said nothing. But when Sophia looked at him, she saw something in his expression she hadn't seen there before. Something open and a little unguarded. Something that looked, she turned this over slowly, not wanting to be wrong about it, something that looked like wonder. When she left, Michael walked her to her car. The afternoon had gone golden long, the way Saturday afternoons went in places that still had seasons. She stood at the driver's side door. He stood a few feet away with his hands in his jacket pockets. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for the tomato soup. He smiled. The real one. The one that was slow and unannounced and reached his eyes without planning to. Will you, he started, then stopped. Will I what? He looked at the ground for a moment. Then back at her. Come back, he said. Just that. She felt it move through her like a current. Yes, she said. She got in the car. She drove back toward the city in the long golden afternoon light and did not turn on the radio and did not look at her phone for 43 miles. And when she finally did look at her phone, There were 67 notifications. She looked at them. She put the phone back down. She thought about Emma's notebook, about Sophie with an I, who had to decide whether to tell the truth. She thought about what Sophia with a P had left out, the thing she hadn't told Michael, the thing she was going to have to tell him, eventually, because he was the kind of man who would need to know it, and because he was the kind of man she did not want to deceive even by omission. The foundation. The one she had been building for 3 weeks in the name of her mother, Elizabeth Bennet, dead at 51, from a heart attack in the parking lot of the grocery store where she had worked for 20 years. Dead in a parking lot without enough in savings to cover her own funeral, and Sophia had paid for it with the first real money she had ever made, standing at the grave at 23 years old, and making a promise she had then spent 15 years turning into a career and forgetting. The foundation was called Second Shifts, named for the second job her mother had always worked. It provided bridge funding and business development support to small businesses and single parents in rural counties. It was already active in 3 states. It was active in this county. And Michael Carter's garage was on the preliminary eligibility list. She had not engineered that. She had not looked up his county and added it because of him. The eligibility list had been built before she ever stood on that rain-dark road. But the fact remained, she had come back to this county, and she had sat in his kitchen, and she had talked about a fleet contract. And at no point had she mentioned that her foundation was 3 weeks away from opening applications to businesses exactly like his. She had not told him because she had not known how. She had not known how because she had not been sure. She was still not sure whether it looked like help or like something else. Whether it looked like a woman who had seen a man who needed something and had arranged the world around him without asking. Whether it looked, in other words, like the thing she had promised herself she would never do. Use the money to manage people, use the resources to control outcomes, give without asking what the person actually wanted. She drove into the city. She parked in her building. She sat in the car in the underground garage and looked at her steering wheel. She was going to have to tell him. All of it. The foundation. The eligibility list. The fleet contract, which was real, which was legitimate, but which she had raised with him within an hour of arriving at his garage on a Saturday morning when she could have raised it by email 3 days ago. She was going to have to lay it out and let him decide what it meant. And she was going to have to be prepared for the possibility that what it meant to him was not what she intended. That the man who had opened a truck door for a stranger without wanting anything in return might look at everything she had arranged, everything she had resources to arrange, and see not help, but power. She sat in the quiet underground garage for a long time. Then she got out of the car. She took the elevator to the 24th floor. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop and looked at the foundation documents and the eligibility list and the fleet procurement report and the restructured merger and Rachel Torres's honest numbers. She thought about a question Michael had asked her, simply, the first morning, over coffee in a farmhouse kitchen. What are you going to do with that? She hadn't known then. She was starting to know now, but knowing what to do and knowing how to do it without breaking the thing she was trying to protect, those were 2 different problems. And Sophia Bennet, who had solved 11 years of business problems, sat in her Silent City apartment and understood that the hardest problem she had ever faced had nothing to do with the numbers. It had to do with a man who trusted carefully, loved deeply, and would walk away from anything that felt like it was managing him. And she was going to have to walk into that risk with nothing in her hands. No strategy, no leverage, nothing but the truth. She drove out on a Wednesday. Not Saturday, not a planned visit with a cleared schedule. A Wednesday, in the middle of the week, in the middle of everything, because she had woken up at 5 in the morning with the specific clarity that sometimes came to her before the world got loud, the clarity that told her, today. If not today, you'll find another reason to wait, and you've been waiting long enough. She called her assistant at 6 and said she'd be out of the office until afternoon. Her assistant said, should I reschedule the Hendricks call? Sophia said yes. Her assistant said, and the 11 o'clock with the foundation team. Sophia stopped. No, she said, keep the foundation meeting. I'll be back by 1. She drove herself again. She had started to prefer it. The 40-mile drive with no one in the back, no one managing the route, no one calibrating the temperature to her preferences. Just the road and the radio and the particular kind of thinking that only happened when you were moving through space without being managed. She thought about what she was going to say. She had run through it 8 times in 8 days. Different versions, different orders, different ways of arranging the truth so that it landed without doing damage. She was good at that, at sequencing information, at structuring a narrative so that the listener arrived at the right conclusion through the right door. But every version she constructed felt like a presentation. And Michael Carter was not a man you presented things to. He was a man you talked to. She parked on the gravel. The garage was open. She could hear the radio. She walked around the side, and Michael was where he almost always was, at the workbench, or under something, or on the phone with a supplier negotiating a part price with the particular blend of firmness and good humor that made people want to give him what he asked for. He was on the phone. He saw her and held up one finger 1 minute, and she nodded and stood in the garage doorway and waited. She watched him on the phone. He was arguing mildly about a price on a brake component. He said the number he'd been quoted the week before. He said he'd been doing business with this supplier for 9 years. He said he understood costs went up, but 9 years meant something, didn't it? He said it without edge, without threat. Just the steady, good-faith reminder of a man who believed that relationships were worth accounting for. He won. He got the number from the week before. He hung up and looked at her. "You're here on a Wednesday," he said. "I am." He studied her face. Something in his expression shifted the particular shift of someone who knew, without being told, that a conversation was coming. Not a bad shift, not alarmed, just prepared. "I'll put coffee on," he said. They sat at the workbench because it was a Wednesday, and the kitchen felt too formal for what she needed to say. She sat on a stool, and he stood across from her with his coffee, and she looked at her own cup and started talking. She told him about the foundation first. She told him her mother's name was Elizabeth, that she had worked 2 jobs for 30 years and had still died without enough in savings to cover a funeral, that Sophia had stood at that grave at 23 years old with the first real check she'd ever written to herself, small, nothing like what was coming, but real, and had promised that she would do something with whatever she built that her mother would recognize. Something that went back down instead of only going up. Michael listened. He did not interrupt. She told him about second shifts. The name, the structure, the 3 states, the rural focus, specifically rural, specifically because her mother had lived and died in a county not unlike this one, and because small-town businesses and single parents in counties nobody covered were the people her mother had been, and they were the people nobody was fighting for. She told him the foundation was 3 weeks from opening applications. She told him this county was on the eligibility list. She told him it had been on the eligibility list before she ever stood on that road in the rain. She stopped talking. Michael set his cup down. He looked at it. He did not look at her. The garage was quiet except for the radio, which was playing something she couldn't identify, low and country, and the distant sound of a car on the road outside. "The fleet contract," he said. "Real," she said immediately. 100% legitimate. "The current contractor is overpriced. My operations team has known it for 18 months. I raised it with procurement the Monday after I got back." A pause. "You would bid for it like anyone else. I have no involvement in vendor selection." He nodded slowly. "But you knew about it," he said. "When you mentioned it to me." "Yes, you knew about it, and you mentioned it on the same morning you drove 40 miles to sit in my garage." "Yes," she said again. He was quiet. She made herself stay quiet too. She had a powerful instinct to fill the silence, to explain, to add context, to shape the interpretation. She sat on her hands, metaphorically, and let the silence be his. He turned his cup once on the workbench. "Why are you telling me this now?" he said. "Because I should have told you sooner. Why didn't you?" She looked at him directly. "Because I was afraid," she said. "That you'd see it." As she stopped, chose the word. "Arrangement. That you'd think I came out here with a plan. That I'd looked up your county and built a route and positioned myself too." She shook her head. "I didn't. I promise you I didn't. But I understand why it might look that way." He finally looked at her. His expression was not angry. It was something more complicated than anger. It was the expression of a man holding 2 things at once, 2 things that were both true and that pulled in opposite directions, and trying to figure out where they balanced. "You run a company worth $8 billion, he said. 8.4. "Sophia, I know, I'm sorry. Go ahead." He rubbed the back of his neck. "What I'm saying is you didn't get there by accident. You didn't get there by doing things without thinking about them." He looked at her steadily. So when you drove out here on a Saturday morning and mentioned a fleet contract and didn't mention a foundation, I need to understand what I'm looking at. You're looking at someone who made a mistake, she said. He waited. I should have told you about the foundation the same day I mentioned the fleet contract, she said. I didn't because I convinced myself the order mattered, that I wanted to establish something real first, something that wasn't about resources, and then add the rest. But what I actually did was sequence the information to manage your reaction. She held his gaze. That's what I do, professionally, and I brought it in here without thinking, and it was wrong. He looked at her for a long waited moment. You're telling me this now, he said. Yes, why now specifically? Because I was going to keep not telling you, she said. And every day I didn't, it became more of a choice. He picked up his cup, set it down again without drinking. My garage is in trouble, he said. I told you that. I laid it out for you, because you asked directly, and I don't know how to talk to you any other way. And now you're sitting here telling me you have a foundation that could help my business and a fleet contract that could help my business, and you came to see me at the same time. I know how it sounds. I'm not finished, he said. She stopped. He looked at her. I'm trying to figure out, he said slowly, whether you came out here to help me or to see me. And I'm trying to figure out whether for you those two things are the same. The question landed like a stone, dropped in still water. She felt the rings of it move outward. She did not answer immediately, because the question deserved not to be answered immediately. For most of my life, she said finally, those two things were the same. Caring about someone and doing something for them. I conflated them because it was easier, because doing something felt cleaner than feeling something. She looked at her hands. The foundation is not why I drive out here. You are why I drive out here. And I'm terrified those two things look identical from where you're standing. Mikkel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, they don't look identical. She looked up. But I need them to stay separate, he said. Whatever the foundation does, that's between the foundation and the application process, and whoever reviews it. I'm not taking anything that comes through your hands directly. His voice was firm, not unkind, firm in the way of a man who knew where his lines were and would not be moved from them. And the fleet contract, if my bid is good enough, it's good enough. If it's not, it's not. I don't want a number adjusted because of anything other than the work. I know, she said. I need you to say it back to me, he said. She looked at him. The foundation and the contract are separate from everything else, she said. Whatever happens or doesn't happen in those processes has nothing to do with me walking in this garage today, and I will not use what I have to put my hand on either one of them. He held her gaze, she held his. Okay, he said, one word, quiet and solid. She let out a breath. They sat for a while after that without speaking, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who had gotten through something hard and were allowing themselves to sit on the other side of it. Michael refilled both cups. Eventually, he said, tell me about your mother. Sophia looked at him. Elizabeth, he said. You said her name was Elizabeth. Sophia set her cup down. She talked about her mother for the next 40 minutes. She talked about the double shifts and the hand-me-down textbooks and the kitchen table where Elizabeth Bennet had helped her daughter with calculus at 11 o'clock at night after 10 hours on her feet. She talked about the way her mother had laughed big, physical, unself-conscious, the laugh of someone who was not preserving any image. She talked about the grocery store, which her mother had loved more than she'd ever admitted had loved, because she knew every customer's name and every customer's family situation, and had kept a mental file of who needed a little grace on a bad week. She talked about the parking lot and the dispatcher who had called Sophia in a conference room in Boston, and how she had finished the meeting before she left to get on the plane because she had not known. Nobody had told her that there was nothing to rush to. Michael did not say anything. He just listened, all the way through. When she stopped talking, she realized her face was wet. She had not noticed it happening. She pressed the back of her hand against her cheek and looked at the ceiling and said, sorry, and Michael said, don't, and that was all he said, and it was exactly the right thing. Emma came home from school at 3:15. She came into the garage first, because she always checked the garage first, and she stopped when she saw Sophia on the stool, and her face did the complicated calculation of an 8-year-old determining the emotional temperature of a room. She looked at Sophia's face. She looked at her father. She walked to Sophia and put both arms around her from the side, without asking, without preamble, the full-body hug of a child who had decided this was what was needed and was not going to overthink it. Sophia went completely still, then she put her arm around Emma and held on. Michael watched this from across the workbench. His expression was the one she couldn't fully read yet, the one that was careful and open at the same time, the one that held something back, not from coldness, but from the discipline of a man who did not move faster than he was sure of. Emma pulled back and looked at Sophia. "Did something sad happen?" Emma asked. "I was thinking about my mom," Sophia said. Emma considered this. "Is she far away?" "She died," Sophia said, "a while ago." Emma nodded slowly. "My mom too," she said. "I know," Sophia said. "I don't remember her," Emma said. "But Dad tells me things about her. So it's like I sort of remember." She looked at her father. "Right, Dad?" "Right," Michael said quietly. Emma looked back at Sophia. "What was your mom like?" Sophia smiled. "The real one. She was loud," she said. "She laughed at everything. She knew everybody's name." Emma smiled back. "She sounds like Mrs. Dempsey," Emma said. "My teacher. She knows everything about everybody." She stood up straighter. "I'm gonna go get a snack. Do you want a snack? We have those crackers you liked." Sophia blinked. "I liked crackers the last time?" Emma looked at her patiently. "The ones with the seeds? You had 3. Sophia looked at Michael. He shrugged. "She remembers everything." Emma disappeared into the house. Michael came around the workbench and leaned against it closer to her. Not touching, just closer. "She's going to put you in the story," he said. "I assumed. The mother character," he said. "She's been struggling with her. Doesn't know what she should be like." Sophia looked at the door Emma had gone through. "Michael," she said. "Yeah. I'm not trying to be anything to Emma that I'm not. I know that. I just want you to know that I know it," she said. "She's your daughter. That's yours. I'm not." She stopped. "I'm not building a picture in my head of something I have no right to be building." He looked at her for a moment. "What picture are you building?" he said. She met his eyes. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Something I haven't had a word for before." He was quiet. The afternoon light moved. "I'm going to tell you something," he said finally. "And I want you to just hear it. You don't have to respond." She waited. 6 years ago, when Claire died. He said his wife's name the same way he always did. Directly, without flinching, without the careful workaround of someone who couldn't face the word. I decided that was it for me, not because I was broken, not because I was giving up on anything, but because Emma was 2 years old and she needed everything, and I didn't have anything left over, and I couldn't risk giving her half a father. He looked at his hands. I've held to that. 6 years. Not because there was never anyone. There were a couple of times I could have. He stopped. I held to it because the reason was real. Sophia listened. And then, he said, some woman I've never seen before gets into my truck in the rain and helps daughter with her homework and drinks coffee at my kitchen table and drives 40 miles on a Saturday because she wanted to. And he shook his head. And now I have a reason I didn't have before. The garage was completely still. Sophia felt her heart doing something that she had no professional language for whatsoever. A reason for what? She asked. He looked at her. To reconsider what I have left over, he said. She looked at him for a long time. Okay, she said. Exactly the way he had said it to her earlier, quiet and solid. He almost smiled. Emma reappeared with crackers. I brought enough for all of us, she announced, and sat on an upturned crate and began to eat with the complete satisfaction of someone who had correctly identified what a situation needed and delivered it. Sophia took a cracker, Michael took a cracker, and the 3 of them sat in the open garage in the Wednesday afternoon and ate crackers and said nothing, and it was the most ordinary and the most extraordinary thing that had happened to any of them in a very long time. At 5 o'clock, Sophia stood up to go. Emma protested. Michael said it was a school night. Emma said that wasn't Sophia's fault. Michael said that was not really the point. Sophia hugged Emma goodbye and Emma said, next time stay for dinner. And Sophia said, I'll try. And Emma said, that's not the same as yes. And Sophia laughed and said, you're right, it's not. Michael walked her to the car. The light was going gold and long again, same as the Saturday before, like the county performed this particular trick at 5 o'clock as a matter of policy. She stopped at the driver's side door. There's something I didn't tell you, Michael said. She turned. His expression was the careful, considered one, the one he wore when he was choosing words with intention. I called around, he said, about the fleet contract. Before you came today, she waited. 3 people I know have bid for Bennett Global regional contracts, he said. In the past 4 years, All of them told me the process was clean. No pressure, no favor. Fairest procurement they'd ever dealt with. He paused. I wanted to know before you got here. She looked at him. You checked, she said. I told you, he said. I'm not a man who takes things on faith without doing some work. He held her gaze. I wanted to believe you, but I needed to know. Something moved through her. Not offense. The opposite of offense. What would you have done, she said, if what you found was different? He looked at her steadily. Told you, he said, and walked away. She nodded. And now, she said, now, he said, I'm going to put together the strongest bid I've ever written. Because I'm good at what I do, and I want that contract, and I'm going to get it on the work. She held his gaze. You're going to get it, she said. Not as a promise, as an observation, he almost smiled. Yeah, he said. She got in the car. He closed the door carefully, the way you close the door on something valuable. She started the engine and rolled the window down. Michael, she said. He leaned slightly toward the window. Thank you, she said, for checking, for being the kind of person who checks. He looked at her. Thank you, he said, for telling me the thing that gave me a reason to. She held that. Then she put the car in reverse and drove down the gravel and onto the county road. She made it 2 miles before she had to pull over. Not because anything was wrong, because something was right genuinely, solidly, unexpectedly, right in a way she had not felt in so long that her body didn't quite know how to carry it while also operating a vehicle. She sat on the shoulder of the county road with her hands in her lap and looked at the field beside the road and let it be real. Not a strategy, not a project, not something she had built or managed or positioned. Something that had found her on a dark road in the rain when she had no phone and no driver and no plan. She sat there for a while, then her phone buzzed. A text message. Michael's number, which she had saved as simply Michael, which was the first time in years she had saved a contact with only a first name. Emma wants me to ask if you're free Sunday. She says it's for research for the story. I'm told to clarify that it's also for pancakes. Sophia read it twice. She typed back, tell her yes. Tell her I'll bring the maple syrup. His reply came in under 30 seconds. She says that's exactly right. See you Sunday. Sophia put the phone down. She pulled back onto the county road. She drove toward the city in the last of the day's light, and for the first time in 11 years, the city did not feel like where she lived. It felt like where she worked. The difference between those two things was 40 miles and a gravel driveway, and a little girl who remembered how many crackers you ate, and a man who had checked the facts before he trusted his feelings, because that was exactly who he was. And Sophia Bennett, who had built $8 billion out of precision and control and the refusal to leave anything to chance, understood that the best thing that had ever happened to her had happened on the one night she had no control over anything at all. She understood something else too, something that settled in beside everything else, and stayed. That the hardest part wasn't over. The hardest part was what came next, when two worlds that had no business overlapping tried to find the place where they could fit together without either one breaking. She didn't know yet if that place existed. But she knew something Michael Carter had taught her without trying to, simply by being who he was every single day. The only way to find out was to show up, keep showing up, without a plan, without a strategy, with nothing in your hands but the truth and the willingness to stay. Sunday came with pancakes and a problem. The pancakes were Michael's thick, golden, made from a recipe his mother had written on an index card that lived in the kitchen drawer, and they were perfect. The problem arrived at 8:17 in the morning, before Sophia had even poured her second cup of coffee, in the form of a news alert that lit up her phone screen where it sat face down on the kitchen table. Emma saw it first, because Emma noticed everything. Your phone is doing the buzzy thing a lot, Emma said. Sophia turned it over. The headline was large and unambiguous. Bennett, global CEO, spotted in rural county source close to company, suggests acquisition target in region. Below it, a photograph, her car, parked on a gravel driveway. A gravel driveway she recognized. She felt the blood leave her face. Michael was at the stove. He had his back to her. He was flipping a pancake and saying something to Emma about whether she wanted blueberries, and the kitchen was warm and smelled like butter, and the radio was playing something easy, and Sophia sat at the table and watched the ordinary Sunday morning she had been looking forward to for 4 days begin to come apart at the seams. Michael, she said. Something in her voice made him turn immediately. He looked at her face. He looked at the phone. He set the spatula down. Emma looked between them with the quick, accurate assessment of a child who had learned to read rooms early. "I'm going to go check on Benny," Emma said, and disappeared down the hall without being asked, because she was 8 years old and smarter than most adults Sophia employed. Michael crossed the kitchen and picked up the phone. He read the headline. He looked at the photograph. He set the phone back down. He did not say anything for a moment, and in that moment Sophia watched him process. It watched the sequence move across his face. Not panic, not anger, something more measured and more serious than either. "Who took this?" he said. "I don't know. Someone who followed me, or I don't know. I didn't notice anyone." She pressed her hand flat on the table. "Michael, I'm sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have mine." "Stop," he said, not harshly. "Don't apologize for existing. I brought this here. You didn't take the photograph," he said. "Sit down. You're already sitting. Stay sitting." She realized she had half risen from the chair without knowing it. She sat back. He poured her coffee. He set it in front of her. He sat down across from her. "What does this mean?" he said. "Practically. What happens next?" She looked at the headline. "Reporters will call my office," she said. "My communications team will issue a statement, something vague about regional business development. They're good at vague," she exhaled. "But the photograph is of your driveway. And anyone who looks will know whose property this is." And then, she stopped. "And then people start asking what a billionaire CEO is doing at a county mechanic's house on a Sunday morning," Michael said. "Yes," he was quiet. "Emma," he said. "I know, she's 8 years old and she goes to a school with 40 kids and 4 teachers, and everyone in a 20-mile radius knows this family." His voice was level, but she could hear what was underneath it, not anger at her, but the specific, focused dread of a father calculating a threat to his child. "If reporters start showing up at the school, they won't," Sophia said. "I will make sure of that personally." He looked at her. "How?" "Because I control the narrative from my end," she said. "If I give them something, they stop looking for something else. I frame this as a business visit, regional economic partnership. My communications director can have a statement out within the hour that makes this entirely unremarkable." She held his gaze. "They'll move on. I promise you, they'll move on." He looked at the phone, "And if they don't?" She didn't look away. "Then I handle whatever comes," she said. "But Emma doesn't get touched. That is not negotiable, and it is not something I will compromise on." He studied her face. She let him. He was reading her the way he read everything directly, without performance, looking for the thing underneath the words to see if it matched. It did, he nodded once. "Make the call," he said. She stepped onto the porch and called her communications director, a woman named Patricia Hale, who had been managing Sophia's public image for 6 years, and who answered on the first ring, because Patricia Hale always answered on the first ring. "I saw it," Patricia said before Sophia spoke. "I need a statement in 40 minutes. I have a draft in 20. Regional Economic Development visit, meeting with local business owners as part of the Second Shift's Foundation outreach." Simple, boring, completely true. "Completely true," Sophia said. "That part matters." A brief pause. Patricia was too professional to ask the obvious question, which was why it needed to be completely true rather than merely defensible. "Completely true," Patricia confirmed. "I'll need one detail for texture. Something specific about the region." Sophia looked at the garage. "Carter's Auto and Repair," she said. "They're bidding for our regional fleet contract. That's public record once procurement posts it, which happens Friday." "Perfect," Patricia said. "Business visit, foundation outreach, and a local vendor relationship. Textbook." Another pause. "Sophia, what? Is there anything else I should know? Anything that's going to surface in a follow-up piece that I haven't prepared for?" Sophia looked through the kitchen window. Michael was back at the stove. Emma had reappeared and was sitting at the table, drawing in her notebook, and Michael was talking to her over his shoulder, and Emma was laughing at whatever he said. "Not yet," Sophia said. Patricia knew her well enough to understand what not yet meant. "I'll have the statement ready in 20, she said. "And Sophia, be careful, not with the story, with yourself." Sophia stood on the porch for a moment after she hung up. "Be careful with yourself." Patricia had never said anything like that before in 6 years. Sophia went back inside. The statement went out at 9:40. By 10:15, 3 of the 4 outlets that had picked up the original story had moved on. By 10:30, the pancakes were cold, and Michael had made a second batch without commenting on the first. Emma ate 2 pancakes and declared them superior to all previous pancakes, which Michael said was the same thing she said every week, and Emma said that was because every week she was right. Sophia sat at the table and felt the tension in her shoulders release by degrees, like a fist slowly opening. Michael set a fresh stack in front of her. "Eat," he said. She ate, and somehow, improbably, the Sunday morning reassembled itself. Not the same as it had been an hour ago. It had a different weight now, a new knowledge sitting in it, but real, and warm, and continuing. Emma showed Sophia the latest chapter of the story. Sophie with Anne had discovered that the man who helped her had a secret of his own. He had once applied to a prestigious engineering school and been accepted, and had given up the acceptance to stay home and take care of someone who needed him, and he had never told anyone. Sophia read it carefully. She looked at Michael. "Is this true?" she said quietly. He looked at his coffee. "Community college scholarship," he said. "Engineering program. Claire got sick the spring before I was supposed to start." He shrugged, the single shoulder shrug she knew now as his way of closing a door gently rather than slamming it. It wasn't a hard decision, it just was what it was. "Michael, I like what I do," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not carrying a grievance. I just stopped. Emma knows things I haven't explicitly told her. I don't know how." Sophia looked at the little girl who was adding a detail to her drawing with great concentration. "She watches," Sophia said. "She does, like her father." He looked at her. The kitchen was warm and quiet, and the radio played on. The fleet contract decision came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks later. Sophia was in a meeting when her phone buzzed with an email from procurement, the automated notification that went to the contracting office, which she was copied on by default as company principal. She looked at it under the table. Carter's Auto and Repair. Awarded. She put her phone away. She said nothing about it for the rest of the meeting. She waited until 6 o'clock, when she knew Emma would be home from school and Michael would be closing the garage, and she called. He answered on the second ring. "I know," he said before she said anything. "You got the notification." Janet got the notification. "She came running into the garage, and I thought something was wrong." His voice was different, she could hear it, the controlled, careful tone of a man who was feeling something large and keeping it steady. "Sophia, congratulations," she said. "It was the work," he said. "I know it was. I need you to know that I know it was." "Michael," she said, "I know I was not involved. Your bid won because your bid was the best. That is the whole story." A long breath. "Yeah," he said. "Okay, how does it feel?" He was quiet for a moment. "Like breathing," he said. "Like I've been holding my breath for 2 years and he stopped." "Yeah." Sophia sat in her office on the 42nd floor and closed her eyes and let that land. "Go tell Emma," she said. "She already knows," he said. Janet told her first. Of course she did. She could hear Emma in the background, saying something emphatic that she couldn't quite make out. "Emma wants to know if you're coming Sunday," Michael said. "Yes, she says bring the maple syrup again. Tell her I'll bring 2 bottles. "A beat, Sophia," he said. "What?" "Thank you," he said. "Not for the contract." For he paused, choosing carefully. "For making me believe the thing was possible before I knew it was." She pressed her hand flat on her desk. "You did that yourself," she said. "Not entirely," he said. She didn't argue. The twist that nobody saw coming happened on a Friday. Not a dramatic Friday. An ordinary one. Sophia was at her desk reviewing the second shift's foundation applications. 214 had come in during the first week alone, far more than projected, and she was reading through them personally. Because she had decided early that she would read every single one herself before the committee reviewed them. Her mother would have expected that. Her mother would have known every name. She was on application number 89 when she stopped. The business, Carter's Auto and Repair. The applicant, Michael R. Carter. She stared at it. She had not known he had applied. He had not told her. He had said in the garage that Wednesday that the foundation was separate, that whatever happened in the application process was between him and the process, and had nothing to do with her. She had agreed. She had meant it. She had built the foundation's firewall deliberately to ensure that her personal relationships, which had not existed when she built it, but which she had been wise enough to anticipate, could not influence decisions. She was not on the review committee. She had no vote. She was reading the applications as a founder, not as a decision-maker. But she was reading this one, and she had to decide right now what to do with the fact that she was reading it. She could set it aside. She could flag it to the committee as a potential conflict and remove herself entirely. She could call Michael and tell him. She sat for a moment. She called Michael, he answered. She could hear the garage in the background, the radio, the sound of something being torqued. "I'm reading foundation applications," she said. "A beat." "Okay," he said. "You a longer beat." "I did," he said. "You didn't tell me." "No," he said, "I didn't, because I meant what I said." "It's separate." A pause. "Are you angry?" "No," she said. "I'm calling, because I'm removing myself from your application entirely. I won't read it. I won't be in the room when the committee reviews it. I won't know the outcome until it's public. I wanted you to know that before it goes forward." He was quiet. "You called me," he said, "to tell me you're removing yourself." "Yes. You could have just done it without telling me." "I could have," she said. "But I told you something hard on a Wednesday in your garage, because I thought you deserved to know." This is the same thing. The sound of the garage faded slightly, like he had walked away from the noise. "Sophia," he said. "What?" "Do you know what I wrote in the application?" he said. "In the section where they ask what the funding would be used for." "I didn't read that far." "I wrote that I want to build a training program," he said, "for kids in the county who want to learn a trade. Not just cars, electrical, plumbing, general mechanics. Kids who can't afford technical school. A real apprenticeship with a real wage while they learn." She sat very still. "I wrote that the idea came to me," he said, "because someone told me that the greatest thing she could do with what she'd built was make it go back down instead of only going up." A pause. "I didn't use your name. I didn't think I should. But I wanted you to know." Sophia Bennett, who had not cried in 11 years and had done it twice already in the past 2 months, sat at her desk on the 42nd floor and felt her eyes fill. "You're going to get that grant," she said. "You just said you're not involved." "I'm not," she said. "But Michael, 214 applications came in. Yours is going to stand out, because of you. Because of the idea," she said firmly. "The idea is exactly what the foundation was built to fund. I know because I built it, and I built it because of my mother, and she built herself out of exactly the kind of county that needs exactly what you're describing." Her voice was steady. "Mostly, this has nothing to do with me." He was quiet. "Everything in my life right now," he said softly, "has something to do with you." She had no professional language for what that did to her. She said Sunday, he confirmed. Emma finished the story 6 weeks later. She announced it on a Sunday morning in the way she announced most things directly, without preamble, appearing in the kitchen doorway with the notebook held up like evidence. "It's done," she said. Michael and Sophia were both at the kitchen table. This had become ordinary, not a weekly occasion or a scheduled visit ordinary. Sophia came on Sundays, sometimes she came on Wednesdays. Once she had come on a Tuesday because she had been 40 minutes from the county for a foundation site visit and had called Michael and said she had an hour. And he had said come, and she had eaten a late lunch at the workbench and gone back to the city with oil on her coat that she had not noticed until Patricia pointed it out the next morning. Patricia had not said anything about the oil. She had smiled briefly, which for Patricia constituted a considerable emotional display. Emma sat down and opened the notebook and read the last paragraph of her story out loud, in the serious, measured voice of a child who understood that the ending mattered. Sophie with Annie, and the man who had stopped his truck on the dark road, had built something together. Not a business empire, not a fairy tale, something realer than either. The training program was running, and 12 kids from the county were learning trades in the garage, and Sophie came every Sunday, and on the days she wasn't there she called, and on the days she called, she talked for longer than she meant to, and the man who had fixed cars and raised his daughter and held his life together with his own hands had stopped being afraid that he didn't have enough left over. He had more than enough. He had just needed someone to see it. The last line of Emma's story was, and the best thing that ever happened to either of them happened because one of them stopped and the other one got in. Emma looked up. Michael looked at Sophia. Sophia looked at Emma. "That's the best ending I've ever read," Sophia said. Emma considered this seriously. "It's true," Emma said. "That's why it works." She closed the notebook. She slid it across the table to Sophia. "You should have it," Emma said. "It's about you anyway." Sophia held the notebook. She looked at the cover, Emma Carter, grade 2, drawn in marker, the letters careful and a little crooked and entirely sure of themselves. "Emma," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Did you always know how it ended?" "From the beginning." Emma thought about this. "No," she said, "I knew the beginning. The rain and the truck and the stopping." She looked at the notebook. "The ending I had to wait for. Some endings you can't write until they happen." Michael reached across the table. He put his hand over Sophia's. Not a grand gesture, not performed. Just his hand, warm and certain, over hers, in the middle of a Sunday morning, in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and maple syrup, and the particular lived-in warmth of a house where someone had chosen to keep showing up. Sophia turned her hand over. She held on. 3 months after that, the foundation granted Carter's Auto and Repair full funding for the apprenticeship program. 12 young people started training the following Monday. Michael had built out the back of the garage over the previous 2 months. Not flashy, not renovated, just functional and clean and organized with the same care he gave everything he touched. He had hired Danny back, the kid with the baby at home, who he'd let go with 6 months of severance he couldn't afford. Danny had cried in the parking lot when Michael called him. Michael did not mention this to anyone, except Sophia, and only because she had asked how it went, and he couldn't lie to her, even about something that embarrassed him by making him feel too much. The 12 apprentices were between 16 and 22. 4 of them were young women who had been told, in various ways by various people, that automotive work was not for them. Michael told them, on the first day, that the only thing that mattered in his garage was whether you showed up and whether you paid attention. He said he'd never been interested in anything else. Sophia was there on the first day. She stood at the back of the garage with her coffee and her coat and watched talk to 12 young people who were going to learn something real, and she felt something she had been slowly learning to name. She felt at home, not at home the way she felt in her apartment, which she did not particularly feel at home in. At home the way she felt when she was standing in the right place, doing the right thing with the right people, and the whole arrangement of her life had stopped feeling like motion and started feeling like arrival. Emma was there too, sitting on the workbench with her new notebook. She was always on a new notebook, drawing the whole thing. Patricia had prepared a small press release about the program, at Sophia's request. It mentioned the foundation. It mentioned Carter's Auto and Repair. It mentioned the apprenticeship. It did not mention Sophia's personal connection to the garage, because Sophia had told Patricia that the story was about the program, not about her, and Patricia had, for the first time in 6 years, looked at her with unambiguous approval. The press release ran in 2 regional papers and 1 national small business journal. It generated 47 inquiries from other small business owners in rural counties, asking about foundation eligibility. Second shifts opened applications in 4 new states the following quarter. On a Sunday in November, Michael Carter asked Sophia Bennett to stay. Not for dinner, not for the afternoon. He asked her in the kitchen after Emma had gone to bed, with the dishes done, and the radio low in the kitchen, holding the comfortable darkness of a house settling in for the night. He said, "I've been thinking about something." She said, "Tell me." He said, "You drive 40 miles every Sunday and sometimes Wednesday and sometimes Tuesday because of a site visit that could have been handled by email." She said, "The site visits are real." He said, "I know they're real." "That's not the point." He looked at her directly. "The point is that this is where you are. When you're here, all the way here. And when you're there," he stopped. "Are you all the way there?" She thought about her apartment. The silence. The 24th floor and the soundproofed walls and the schedule that ran from before dawn until after dark and the beautiful, efficient, hollow life she had built in the middle of it. "No," she said, "not anymore." He nodded. "I'm not asking you to give anything up," he said. "I'm not asking you to change anything about what you do or who you are. I know who you are. I knew before I knew your name." He held her gaze. "I'm asking if you want to stop driving back." The kitchen was very still. "Michael," she said, "I know it's not simple," he said. "I know the company is in the city. I know you have a life there. I know there are 100 reasons." "Yes," she said. He stopped. "Yes," she said again, quiet and solid and completely sure. He looked at her. "Just like that," he said. "Just like that," she said. "I've been waiting for you to ask." He shook his head slowly. Not disbelief. Something closer to wonder, which she was familiar with by now, that particular expression that appeared on his face sometimes when she said a true thing directly, like it still surprised him that she could. "Emma's going to be insufferable about this," he said. "Emma's going to say she knew," Sophia said. "She did know," Michael said. "I know she did." He reached across the table. She took his hand. Outside, the county was dark and quiet, and full of the particular kind of silence that meant something had settled, not because it was over, but because it had finally found the place it was supposed to be. People asked Sophia about it for years afterward. In interviews, at conferences, in the small human moments that happen at the edges of professional life when someone works up the nerve to ask the real question. They wanted to know how a billionaire CEO and a county mechanic had found each other. They wanted the story in the shape of a lesson, a strategy, a set of transferable steps. She always gave the same answer, not because it was rehearsed, because it was the only true thing she had. She said, "A man stopped his truck on a dark road when he had no reason to, and I got in." And everything that came after the conversations, the kitchen table, the notebook Emma made, the foundation, the 12 kids learning trades in a garage, the Sunday mornings and the maple syrup, and the 40-mile drives, and the life I didn't know I was building while I was busy building everything else, all of it came from that one moment. His choice to stop, my choice to get in. She said, "I spent 15 years believing I could engineer the things that mattered most, optimize them, position them, build toward them with sufficient precision that they would arrive on schedule." She said, "The best thing in my life arrived in the rain, on a road I wasn't supposed to be on, when my phone was dead and my suitcase was broken, and every plan I had was already gone." She said, "If you want to know what I learned, the real thing, the thing underneath all the rest, it's this. Some things cannot be built, they can only be found. And you can only find them when you stop managing the outcome long enough to let something real walk through the door." Michael Carter had taught her that, not by telling her, by being it every single day, without apology, without performance, without ever once needing to know what she was worth before deciding she was worth stopping for. That was the whole story, that was all of it. And it was, by every measure that had ever mattered, more than enough.